Hello and welcome back to the Phil Rosenberg Show. I am, of course, Phil Rosenberg, and we're in a troubled moment here. And I very graciously, Jeremiah Hosea has agreed to talk to us for a while about what's happening in the world. We're going to do a little bit of, maybe a lot of it, of George Floyd, who was killed on May 25th in Minneapolis. Thanks so much for being here, Jeremiah. I appreciate you being willing to share your thoughts and taking the time out.
Well, I appreciate you appreciating it, and I appreciate you creating the forum, because I think this is an important conversation, and people of all different backgrounds need to just sit down and really talk these things through and hear other points of view so we can, move forward in an educated and productive way. Because, there's a lot of takes on this, as you might have noticed.
I have, and I'm very interested in your particular take. You don't usually have just the, like, whatever the media regurgitates. That seems to be, like, the majority of folks, whatever their favorite media source regurgitates, they just reflect that.
Yeah.
And one thing I know about you, and the reason I've invited you to come talk on the show, is because that is not you. You formulate your own opinions. And
man, I really appreciate you noticing that, because I do take pride in that. If I may, I want to start the conversation maybe by just suggesting I think that bifurcated thinking is deeply problematic, and I feel like it's becoming pervasive. I feel like I'm just noticing more people really being stuck in the red coat versus blue coat mentality, like to the extent that people just start arguing with you in a continuation of their previous argument, along the same guidelines, not noticing that, well, I'm actually not saying what the last person you spoke to said. I'm expressing a different point of view that you haven't taken the time to take in.
I mean, what you're saying in short, I think, is like people are not listening to each other. That's really what it is.
They're not listening to each other. They're clinging on to things that they use to identify themselves, and then things they use to identify their enemy or their perceived enemy, and just running with it.
I think you're describing a lot of the middle, but we're here to talk about in a rational way, and in a sensitive way, if right, and as sensitive and rational as we can be. And by the way, I have, as with you, and one of the reasons why we've known each other a long time and been able to maintain a friendship is because neither one of us is a black and white thinker, if you don't mind me saying that right at this moment.
Watch yourself.
Right. So, right. We're both critical thinkers, and we both understand nuance and appreciate approaching things from Absolutely. More than just.
Well, I think, I don't want to make it a big mutual, what is it? A mutual congratulations or flattery party. But I will say, Philip, in our discourse over the years as chess coaches, as radio co-hosts, we both enjoy the polemics. I think that's the thing, is that I can argue with you, as we were just sort of arguing before we started this interview, but we enjoy it because
never personal. That's why it's never personal.
It's not personal, and we enjoy thinking things through. Exactly. Whereas some people don't enjoy that, and they don't notice that they don't enjoy it, and it starts shifting into a personal realm where I never want it to be in that personal realm. My thing is, we're enjoying this conversation, and if we're not, let's walk away, let's take a deep breath, because I don't want to get into people's feelings getting hurt. I just want to have a good conversation.
So for the purpose of an interview, though, it's not going to be, so that's how I am when I am talking to someone that I just like and respect, ordinary conversation, what you just described. For the purpose of an interview and how I expect it. So this is going to be released, and this is an actual interview. And so you're on the Phil Rosenberg Show. And so it's okay if we disagree, and we do so vehemently. It's good that neither one of us takes it personally. So, but I don't think let's see if we even disagree. I am not even here to give my opinion, actually. I'm here to find out what yours is. So we may not even have the opportunity to disagree.
Well, feel free to disagree if you don't like anything that I'm saying, but what's the first question of the official interview?
So, right. Okay, so I first want to address one, we're going to go to the end of the discussion instead of the beginning of the discussion. So, and what I mean by that is we're just going to talk about some of the symptoms rather than the disease, right? So the disease being racism, institutionalized racism. I want to discuss that. But I want to get all the way to the symptoms first, because we're in the middle of riots. And those are the symptoms, right? Looting, violence, peaceful protest, all kinds of different protests, running the gamut. Those, I would say, are the symptoms of the disease. But I want to address them. I would like to know, where do you fall in terms of protest? What do you think should happen to people that are vandalizing, that are looting? What do you think should happen to, how should those people be differentiated, or should they be differentiated from people who are protesting peacefully?
Man, you're asking such an enormous question to start out with.
Welcome to the party.
Yeah, welcome to the party. Well, let me start out by saying that people are outraged right now. They're outraged at their core. They feel as though their very humanity has been disrespected, that they could be George Floyd. They could be strangled on the ground, and the system will allow that. The system will say, well, that's just police protocol. Well, obviously, we have an arrest now in this case, which isn't always the case. Obviously, we've ranged in these dramatic cases from non-indictment to indictment and acquittal, to actually some people, just from what I've heard, going on and getting raises and promotions within the force after committing egregious crimes that you would think would cause you to, one, lose your job, and two, probably go to jail. And in a lot of cases,
What would be an example of that? Just curious.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I don't want to say wrong names off the top of my head. But any number of people who are not facing jail time, like the killers of Amadou Diallo, they didn't go to jail. They might have risen in the professional ranks because there was consent. And again, I don't want to use that as an example because I don't have my research materials right in front of me. But if we look it up, we will see that, yes, police officers who were engaged in egregious acts that were videotaped, if they were not indicted and then not acquitted, they continued rising in the ranks, in their professional ranks. So that's just kind of natural.
I would let me play the devil's advocate and say this. In some cases, the acquittal is not justified, I would say. And in other cases, the acquittal is justified on a case-by-case basis. Amadou Diallo is, I would argue, is a case that there should not have been an acquittal, but let's just take the whole range of cases. In those cases where an acquittal is justified, shouldn't a police officer thereafter be able to rise in the ranks and have success in his or her career?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, if it's innocent till proven guilty, yeah, I mean, it's not like, oh yeah, you were found innocent and now we carry on as though you're guilty. But what I'm saying is, yeah, these were wrong, innocent verdicts in a lot of cases. Or, you know what? Let's take the complicated case, and I'm not answering the question that we posed in the first place, but
yeah,
there is the issue in Amadou Diallo, for example. Some people said, well, they made a mistake trying to pin murder on those police officers.
Let's
charge them with manslaughter.
Jeremiah, let's just tell people, for those, because we're kind of old, right? And we're also from New York.
I got my grays up here. You can see them spring. Zoom covers up my gray pretty well. But I'm catching up with you there, partner.
So here's the thing. Not everyone knows who Amadou Diallo is. Why don't you give us a little primer for those who are too young or are not from New York and might not have heard the tragic story of.
Okay, well, Amadou Diallo was an immigrant, a West African immigrant, I believe from Guinea, who was working as a street vendor, long 14, 15-hour work days, by every account, a perfectly nice young man who had an apartment in the Bronx. He was going home. The police followed him in this aggressive way into the hallway of his apartment building and I guess asked him for ID, supposedly. But when he went to reach for his wallet to grab his ID, they just, lit him up with a barrage of bullets, 41 shots fired, 19 of those shots hit him, including apparently bullet holes in the bottom of his feet, meaning after he had collapsed flat on the ground, they continued firing at this man.
Where the entry point is the bottom of his feet, which suggests that he's not standing at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like this is how, I mean, this is outrageous. A man who was unarmed, who ultimately was guilty of no crime, to be executed in the hallway of his apartment building. Is that not at least reckless endangerment? I mean, police are allowed to open fire on somebody in a hallway where children and people
good.
are
So
behind these doors.
let me segue now. Let me segue us, because what you're talking about is the crux of the issue. We're not talking about George Floyd in this exact second, because George Floyd is not a one-off, and that's why this conversation.
Right. Well, this is what I'm saying. I think we need to pay attention to the egregious nature of a list of cases, and there's also many other very egregious cases that did not receive the publicity.
There are, but I want you to answer my question if you don't mind.
That?
So I would like you to answer my question if you don't mind, though. I want to talk for a minute about we'll get back to the history.
About the looters and the rioters and where I fall.
Should they be treated? Should people that are looters and vandals, and perhaps, and then separately maybe people who are violent, be treated differently than peaceful protesters? If so, how? Should we be permissive?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to treat them differently because, I mean, they're different people who are acting in different ways. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I'm not offended the way some people are by looting and rioting, so to speak. I'm offended by people injuring other people. If you attack an innocent person, I'm appalled and disgusted by that. Okay. If you break the windows of a store, I'm not appalled by that. Not in this moment, not in this interval. I think a big problem, here's a big problem. Here's the crux that I think a lot of people are not acknowledging is people are.
Why not? Why not? Exactly. I'm curious why not, because they're obvious.
Because we have been told as Black people, first of all, but as citizens who have witnessed these atrocities of police murder, we have been told that the private property system is above the value of our lives. And that's what people are doing. Maybe some people are politicized in some way, and some people are just vandals taking advantage of the situation. There's a lot of gray, shades of gray in the situation. But
so should the police treat these groups of people differently is my question.
The nonviolent protester and the vandal.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, you just have to. I mean, if a person's vandalizing a store, again, I'm not personally horrified by that. I'm horrified by the execution of George Floyd.
Of course.
But yeah, if I'm breaking into a store, I don't expect to get away with it because there's other peaceful protesters across the street or in some other location. Like, yeah, you break windows and you should be concerned that the store owner can harm you, first of all. If I'm a store owner and you're breaking into my store, I will use physical force to harm you. And that's me looking out for my own personal interest. And if the police see you doing that, they're going to try to stop you. And you should have been aware of that before you are engaged in these kind of behaviors. That being said, I think we have a really complicated discussion on our hand. I honestly think,
like I said, we talked about the symptom. First, yeah. I wanted to, because the thing is that is in our face right this second as New Yorkers. Minnesota's far away. Racism is not far away. Police brutality is not far away. But this George Floyd incident is.
Let me ask you a question. Can I flip the script a little bit?
100%.
Let me be the. Let's.
You want to interview me for a second?
Yeah, I'm going to interview you for a second here.
Go ahead.
Which is, what do you think about the level of social responsibility of your average store owner? Was the average store owner concerned whatsoever with the murder of Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? These cases that we've witnessed in our lifetimes, or just even in the past few years. Did you think as a store owner that it was perfectly okay for the police to murder unarmed people, and that there would never be a riot, that there would never be a broken window to a store, and that store might be yours? I think. So
I would like. Are you asking me?
Is it okay? I'm asking. Is it okay to be a business owner who has decided that they are not concerned with social matters such as this? They're just running a business. Is that a socially acceptable position, would you say?
So there's never. I'm not a left and right, up or down, black and white person. So let's first
As we
differentiate
said
between,
in the beginning,
so
right?
let's first differentiate between a mom and pop shop in a, that's part of a community, and a corporate entity which is not part of a community, that's controlled by profiteering, or people that the job that you're being hired for at the corporate level is just to make money. The job is not necessarily to be part of the community. And even when you do set aside a budget to do things to be positive, to have a positive effect in your community, really that's marketing for your business. It's not because at the corporate level, you're not sitting in the boardroom with the other bigwigs and going, well, we really love the community in Bedford-Stuyvesant, so let's do some great things for them. No, it's like there's a specific percentage of the budget that is designed as part of the marketing budget to do something positive. So I'm just saying that the corporate entity in a community is different than the mom and pop shop in a community. And I don't expect the corporate entity to be responsive at the community level, except as a reflex. In the same way that I just don't think
Okay, I agree with that distinction completely, but let's leave the corporate entity out of this. I'm talking, in my hypothetical, I'm talking about the mom and pop shop. They're in the community, they sell their bagels or whatever they do, and people broke the windows.
You would hope that they would be outside protesting with you on, right? If they're a mom and pop shop, hopefully they're out there marching peacefully with you. If, from my point of view, the peaceful marching is the kind of marching that should be done, in my view. Other people feel differently. It's not a right or wrong thing. I'm just expressing my view. But I say that
but hold on, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Go, if you want to ask it. You're doing the interview now, so I'm prepared.
Well, just for a moment. But yeah, my thing is, but I feel people are really not giving enough credence to the fact that, well, we have seen one unarmed black person after another get murdered on video, and we have been told to not trust our lying eyes. Which, to me, if you see someone commit an illegal act on video, there should be no discussion about whether or not we've seen what we've seen. The only discussion should be, how do we punish the person who did what we saw? And we've been told over and over again not to trust.
So what about a trial, though? What about due process? Do we ignore due process? Because
yeah,
I agree with you.
Process is showing the video of you getting murdered.
Not due process. That is not due process. Let's call it damning evidence that allows for due process to take place. But that the video itself, just the video.
Hey, look, man, look, there's guilty people. I'm sorry if it doesn't apply like that.
But due process
if I'm on video murdering somebody, yes, I will go to jail because they have me on video, and that's the due process. They saw the evidence in court of what you did, and that's all we needed to see.
But the video is not due process.
I didn't say anything against due process. We have video evidence. And we're being told to not trust our lying eye. Within the context of due process, we saw evidence. We don't go and do backflips over and over again to convince ourselves that guilty people are innocent.
No, I just wanted. Okay, so you're asking me, right? So I'm saying that it's important to make one thing that I say is this: video is damning evidence, but I do believe that you have to have a fair trial. Now, in those cases where fair trial is not being had, because the system of justice is broken, it's racist, it is flawed. That's what the issue, I think, really is. But I would just want to be clear about the one thing, since you're asking me. My opinion is that no matter what the video evidence is, you must first have a trial. If you don't, then it's not due process. Instead, it's vigilantism. That I don't want.
Sometimes vigilantism is good, I'm sorry to say.
Okay.
For example, what if black people had the ability to bring justice to, what's the name of this offensive officer? Chauvin, the chauvinist. Chauvin, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But
I'm not totally sure.
But basically, would it be a terrible thing?
Turning off my phone because it kept on beeping. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, audience.
Well, let me give you an example of people's justice. Okay, and I think people's justice can be quite a wonderful thing, even if it's a wonderful thing in very unpleasant, negative circumstances. When I was in South Africa, I've been to South Africa 3 times. The first time I was in South Africa, it was brought to my attention that there was an epidemic of rape going on. That at that point, Cape Town was possibly the rape capital of the world. A lot of rapes were going on. It was pretty horrifying to hear about. A group of women took it upon themselves to be vigilantes, and they were not getting justice in the community. There were young girls getting raped. They would go to the police precinct. The rapists were not getting arrested. And women said, "We're going to fix this." One of the victims, or maybe a few of the victims, identified. They were basically able to just identify the rapist. The young girl said, "I was kidnapped. I was taken into that house over there." Women with baseball bats went to the rapist's house and beat him, not to death, but beat him within an inch of his life. And that, to me, is just a wonderful thing. I think it's terrible that the girls were raped, that this was necessary, but that was not wrong. It's not right to wait for a justice system that doesn't actualize justice and then sit back and say, well, that's fine. They didn't produce the right result and we're just going to sit back. No, justice, at some point, justice will be done. And I'm sorry
so if you don't have to apologize. There's no apology necessary for that. You're talking about the South African system that is maybe more or maybe less broken than our own system. And in those cases, I guess, so now we bring it back to the United States. We're saying cops end up going free.
Free. And also, but let's also quickly add, though, also non-cops. George Zimmerman wasn't a cop. He was a white guy who decided he could just kill a black child, a black teenager that night. And my question is this, I'm sorry to interrupt you guys. I know you're about to say something great, but let me just throw in really quickly, though, for people who try and make like what I think is a false equivalence here. And they say, we're only hearing about white cops killing black people, but other kind of crimes happen too. Latinos kill blacks, blacks kill blacks, blacks kill whites, and all this kind of thing. My question is there really, and maybe there is in one case or another, because I don't know everything that's happened in the world, and I don't know every police crime that wasn't reported. But I think we need to pay attention to the egregious nature of these situations on a case-by-case basis. Like, for example, is there a white Trayvon Martin in America? Is there a white kid who was killed by a black vigilante who took it upon himself to play vigilante and follow and kill a white kid and get away with it? Is there a white Eleanor Bumpers?
Let me interrupt there 1 second, because the difference
is there a white George Floyd?
Hang on a second.
Is there a white Amadou Diallo? Was a white man ever shot at?
Allow me to be the interviewer again, if you don't mind.
Okay. Because I wanted to make my little list, though.
Okay, but here it is, though. Those are different situations, because one is systemic injustice and one is individual injustice. The problem is when the police because they're an instrument of the government, right? An instrument of the system that we are all supposed to respect and support and abide by. So it's when the police are doing it, it is very different than a citizen in any other capacity doing it, because it's not systemic injustice if a dude who doesn't like black people, a white guy who doesn't like black people does something criminal, or a black person who does something criminal against a white person. If they're just ordinary citizens, we can say that it's motivated by racism, that it's wrong, and so on. No matter how wrong it is, though, and no matter how frequently it occurs, it is still to be substantially differentiated from when the police do it, because the police equals the state. And you can't fight against the state, right? You can fight against a person. How do you fight against the state? Except by protest. That's what's happening in 75 United States cities. So these are, it's important to make that distinction. That's all I wanted to say there. So
I don't know how that contradicts anything I just said.
I'm not contradicting you. I'm not contradicting you.
I totally agree with you. I think it's so ridiculous to just.
I'm just making an observation. This is not about contradiction.
I think I completely agree with what you're saying, which is I think it's really ridiculous, this line that I've seen a lot of people indulge in, which is just simply making a one-to-one equation between people and not making any distinction for law enforcement officer. Yes, we of course we have to hold police officers to a higher standard than ordinary citizens. I mean, of course. And I also think it's funny, the ridiculous excuse for a lot of these behaviors of saying, oh, they were scared for their life. But you have a badge.
Let me ask another question.
You have the
Jeremiah,
law.
we have a limited amount of time, so let me ask another question.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk for a minute about solutions, if there are any.
Yeah.
First of all, two questions. First, what does if we were to be able to solve through some action the problem, what would that look like? What does success look like? What would we be aiming at to try and make different? So, and then let's ask, how do we get there to that successful outcome?
Man, those are so great. I think it's too extensive to say offhand, like in a short period of time. I think we need to get into different categories of solutions. Like before we make our list of solutions, I think we need to make a list of categories of solutions. Like on one level, I think you're engaged in a solution right here, engaging in critical dialogue, creating media that other people can think about. I think that's really valid and relevant what you're doing. We know that's not just going to change the laws. We know that's not in and of itself going to stop police violence. But I think what you're doing right here is relevant and a little piece of the puzzle. I think
you're not answering the question though. Hold on. I'm not asking what's relevant or how do we get there right now. I'm saying I'm asking what does success
right.
look
Okay.
like?
So jumping to what does success look like? I think success is when there's no more egregious police killings, that the police don't even have it in their mind that they could ever get away with such a thing like this, that they would know, well, if you kill somebody, an unarmed person, you're immediately losing your job. You're probably going to jail for manslaughter, and depending on the circumstances, maybe murder. And that's absolutely what would happen, just like in reverse, because we're seeing police abuse people and really with the notion that there's no consequences whatsoever. And we know that the same is not true in reverse. Did you see the footage from just about 2 or 3 days ago of the police officer, strong, buff guy, pushing aggressively a woman onto the ground? She slams her head on the concrete, was knocked unconscious. The guy didn't even flinch. He just kept marching down the street, and the group of officers he was with, none of them took a look to see if she was okay. That they had a man had knocked a woman unconscious on the streets, and she actually had seizures on the way to the hospital. And the point is, you try pushing a police officer on the head or on the ground, they fall on their head and wind up unconscious. Yeah, you see if you get away with that. So the same way I can't get away with that, they should not be able to get away with that. And the problem is right now, they can and will.
So accountability is, we're saying
accountability and a notion that you can't get away with shit. That actually we're holding you to a higher standard instead of
accountability is, right? That's what we're saying. If you not being able to get away with it is what accountability is.
Right, there you go. Exactly.
So, okay, so one thing is that's what success looks like.
Well, you know what I have to say though, I don't believe in police. I mean, I don't want to make a whole left turn, which I'm known for making a left turn.
Sorry, baby, you just did. I don't believe in police.
I don't believe. I put it this way. Let's think about the police problem from a slightly different point of view. The notion of the police department, the notion of a police officer is sort of a ridiculous one. You're saying that there's this designated group, a department, whose job it is to deal with all the harmful people in society while everybody else goes about their merry business. And I just think it's a dumb idea. We need to start getting into a notion.
That's going to be the next. I have things to say about that, and I know how things go between us. So what I want to say is, let's do another interview about this idea.
This is going to have to be like a 5-part series, man. Yeah, we don't stop. But the point is that I think there needs to be a lot more community involvement in community.
Okay, so now you're answering the question I haven't asked. So let me ask the question, and then I'll give you a chance to answer it. We now have an idea of at least one facet of success is accountability for the police department. We've said that. So my next question is, how do we get there? What do we have to do? What policies, what initiatives, education, whatever it is, what do you think needs to happen in society for that change to come into effect? What do we have to do to get there?
We have to riot.
But just
I mean,
rioting is just
no,
rioting.
I'm saying that facetiously, but let's also admit that the polite way did not get any results either. So people are disdaining rioting and not admitting that their polite approach accomplished practically nothing but a lot of symbolic gestures. So
I mean, what's the polite approach? I don't know. People are saying that the polite
approach is going to court, and then when they find guilty people innocent, you say, "Oh well, the system doesn't work all the time." Or then maybe you say, "Oh, let's go to the appellate court," and the appellate court says, "Oh no, sorry, we're not interested. We agree with the initial ruling," and then everybody takes their ball and goes home. But systems are often wrong, and the majority is often wrong.
So to make it right, we do what?
To make it right, we have to stop the system. We have whatever we can do to interfere with their authority when their authority is being wielded incorrectly. That is correct.
So hold on a sec. So, but let's get. I want to drill down because that sounds to me like a slightly dangerous idea. So I just want to make sure it cannot be misinterpreted what you just said. So you're saying because you said whatever needs to be done by
any means necessary, right? I didn't come up with that quote. That's Malcolm X. By any means necessary.
But okay, we want accountability, and the way to get there is anything that we have to do. But to get there, anything, whatever it is. But I'm specifically asking you what things what is that, or that we're saying that needs to be done? Because as you say, just going to court, that's not effective, right? You're saying that doesn't. So what does need to be done? Are we saying go out and kill the bad guys? Who are the bad guys? We identify them. All the bad guys are dead. Now we proceed because there's only good guys left.
I mean, I'm not a big fan of killing bad guys, first of all, because there's always another little bad guy to pop up in their place, like a jack in the box.
And who decides who the bad guy is, for that matter, as well?
So this is a big problem. This takes us to the Ho Chi Minh essays, decrying the Vietnamese Revolution and all the unnecessary killing and the senseless killing of innocent people. And how.
But there are people, though, who are saying we want a French Revolution, Robespierre type situation where it's off with their heads. So, but you're not saying that. So, okay, that's just.
I'm not advocating that on the internet. No, I'm not here producing legal documents of suggesting violent behavior. I mean, look, these are complicated matters. This is why we need to have a part 2, part 3, part 4. But kind of going back to your initial question, and hopefully this connects with this last question, I think we all need to say, hey, look, if you didn't engage in the type of civil disobedience, community-based action that addressed these issues, then you can't really sit back and complain and expect to have any say in the matter of how the absolute chaos of things unfolds. Because yes, people have been murdered. There's a level of outrage and despair, and that's what a mass uprising is. It's massive, and it's spontaneous, and it's unpredictable. And some people are politicized and some people aren't. And I might approve or disapprove of some individual's behavior, but that's not up to me at this point, because this is a level of rage that transcends any one individual. And, hey, it's not going to come in a nice, neat little package. Like, yeah, was the American Revolution a nice, polite little event? Was the French Revolution a nice, polite little event? Was the Chinese Revolution a nice, polite little event? Like, people.
Are you saying that nothing short of a violent revolution will solve this problem? Is that one of the it sounds
I hope not. I would like to think that maybe somehow this could be the first time in human evolution that we can solve things without violence.
Would not be the first time. Look at South Africa.
Yeah, but the problem is there's just still gross, unacceptable, despicable inequality in South Africa. You go to South Africa, people are living in shanty towns by the millions, while a white minority still enjoys a privileged position there. If the people from those shanty towns rose up and dragged those people out of their houses and said, you don't own this land anymore, like this is what happened in Zimbabwe. Okay. I'm not opposed to it.
Okay, but
you can't be a minority dominating a majority of people thinking it's going to go on forever. You can't think that the people, when they rise up,
by the way,
do so
politely. A notable difference, by the way, Jeremiah, is that in this country, I'm not sure that I'm not saying it's an important difference. It is notable in that it is observable. Is that in Zimbabwe, in formerly Rhodesia, in South
Rhodesia is
Africa.
just named after the racist Cecil Rhodes, who the
Cecil
Rhodes
Rhodes, right.
Scholarship is named.
But that's when that's when the country was most dominated. I mean, that's when it was clearly a small group of white people controlling all the resources. It was part of the colonial system of that day, right?
Just up till recently, you have 3% of the population controlling 80% of the land.
Right.
I mean,
so what I'm saying is that's a different situation than what's happening here, because African Americans are a minority. So as opposed to, so there's a majority dominating a minority. I'm just saying that's different than a minority dominating.
Oh yeah, no, I understand. Qualitatively different situation. Sure.
Yeah. But I want to ask how much time, gee whiz. There's more to talk about. I want to now really shift the discussion, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop this video. We're going to call this part 1. We're going to start again, and we're going to have a slightly different discussion. We're going to approach this from a different angle. I want to talk about culture, the African American community, on that, the different shades of culture.
Good question. Good topic.
Yeah, so let's do that, but let's make it part 2. So, okay, folks, thank you very much for tuning in. Part 2 is coming right up. Look down there, click that subscribe button if you would be so kind. The more you click subscribe, the more videos I will do, the more information you will have. Thank you very much. Jeremiah, thanks for being with me now. Thanks for staying with me for part 2. Folks, we'll talk to you in just, click on to the next video. All right, thanks very